Hey there, friends. Welcome to another edition of the Premier Investments and Wealth Management Financial Program. My name's Doug Wagner. Before I introduce the gentleman around the table with me, I want to ask you a question. It's a brand new year. Have you kept all of your financial resolutions? Yeah, you know what? A lot of people haven't. In fact, it takes like maybe 2 weeks to break a lot of resolutions, but one you should keep is getting that financial plan. And it's really easy to do. Just go to premieriwm.com, click Get Started, answer a few questions, and they'll provide for you a one-page Premier Vision Plan. What it is, it's a document that has all the information that you need for your financial future. They'll even give you a free, no-obligation consultation. Sit down with you and go over it so that you can decide what your next step is. But the first step is go to premieriwm.com, click Get Started. Either that, you can also call to make an appointment, 800-383-6590. That's 800-383-6590. Premier Investments and Wealth Management, named to Forbes 2026 Best in State Wealth Management Teams. Directly to my right, he's a wealth advisor, accredited investment fiduciary, certified financial planner, professional CFP with over 11 years of experience in the investment industry. He is Dr. Casey Mushrush.
Just to you, Doug.
How you
Good
doing?
to see you. I was going to compliment you. I think that after so many years, your intros are getting better and better. They're finally serviceable.
Thank you very much for finally serviceable. That was pretty good. That's what my wife says about my pancakes. Also here, a wealth advisor with over 31 years of experience in the investment industry. It is Jonas Everett. How you doing?
I'm doing good, Doug.
Got the quarter zip sweater on. Got to. Love it.
You are my Grand Slam breakfast, buddy.
There you go.
You're a Grand Slam every time.
You guys are hungry or something today.
Hey, it gets so cold, you got to just keep on eating to keep weight on. Yeah. That's the other thing. He is known as the Big Kahuna, all right? But in his family's kids call him the Big Dog. He is Roger Abel, president and wealth advisor, accredited investment fiduciary. He's also a certified exit planning advisor, SEPA, with over 22 years of experience in the investment industry. Roger, good to see you again.
Good to see you again, Doug. I'm glad you recognize that I'm known as Big Dog. I think it's just the random sticker.
Yeah.
One of my kids decided to slap on the back of my
tablet.
My little tablet.
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, I could do like that really bad commercial where the guy goes, oh, 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 oh.
We can invite Sprite. We can invite Sprite on the show.
You want me
to get Sprite back?
But I like my job.
You like your job. You mentioned it being cold. I just am used to being cold. I'm sitting here. I'm freezing. I'm just used to it now.
Well, underneath these glaring lights, it gets kind of hot in here, so I'm going to have to ask questions and let you guys do the rest of the work because I'm starting to glisten a little bit. First one's to you, Roger. It's Corey. Says, I'm 61 and I'm hoping to retire around 65, so that's about 4 years. Don't know if that's realistic. My wife's 59. She plans to work a little bit longer. Between our 401ks and IRAs, we have about $1.2 million saved. We still owe $140,000 on our mortgage, but it'll be paid off in about 7 years. We spend around $7,500 a month right now. I keep asking myself, are we actually close to retirement, or am I being overly optimistic?
Good question, Corey. Depends. Depends on how much you spend. And you told us you spend $7,500. It also depends on what income sources you have. So if we start to think about planning for somebody's retirement, one of the first things we look at is what's the budget? How much do we spend? Mm-hmm. We're spending $7,500. So I would extrapolate that we're going to continue spending $7,500, and then that mortgage will likely fall off. But what we don't know is what are your guaranteed income sources? That's really the next thing we look at is where are you going to get income from? And there's really three ways.
In retirement?
In retirement,
okay.
Yeah. We're not worried about income now.
Right.
You clearly have it. But in retirement, where are the income sources that we're going to have? And typically, there's two primary places people get income: Social Security and a pension, if they have a pension. So we kind of need to know those numbers. And I think this is where people really like to get caught up in benchmarking themselves against other people. And right here, they're asking me to benchmark themselves like, oh, do you think I'm on track? Well, maybe. Like, I think if you just ran the quick numbers here to accumulate $1 million, 1.2, You have two people that are working. You probably have Social Security checks between $4,000 and $6,000 a month once you take them. You got $1.2 million portfolio. It'll probably work out, but it really depends on what your goals, your priorities are, what the location of these assets are. We know they're 1.2 million saved. Well, is that pre-tax and a Roth, or is that all post-tax? It's two different beasts. We kind of have to know a little bit more information. So if I were you, Corey, the number one thing I'd be doing as you start to prepare for retirement is, one, I'd really start to envision what it looks like. I think that's where we start with everybody. What are your goals and priorities in retirement? What do you plan on doing? And then start to match the assets or the goals to a dollar amount, because we have to get a budget in retirement. And it's likely different than when you worked. We actually have a resource out there. If you go to our, the Investor Center on the website, premieriwm.com, you can download the 10 critical steps before retirement. And part of that is figuring out or putting a number to the budget. After we have that, then you need to sit down and get a financial plan done and see where you stand.
Okay.
And you still have 7 years, 5 to 7 years. So if you need to make some adjustments, it's not like all's lost. If you come and meet with us 5 months before you retire, well, it just kind of is what it is. But with 5 to 7 years of runway, I think there's an opportunity to make some planning changes if that needs to happen.
Yeah, it's something you said a little bit earlier, and I do not like it, and I know why you said it. You probably will be okay. Now, the reason I don't like that is because it is a high degree of uncertainty. However, to your point, we really have absolutely no idea until you start to dive over into those numbers and get, here's where you're at, here's where you're trying to get to, and here's what you need to do in order to make that actually happen.
Good point.
You know, one of the things that I was thinking about this is that I get emails on a regular basis from a food and entertainment magazine that I subscribe to, and the emails in there. I mean, they send these out to maybe 500,000 people every time they send them out, something like that. And could you retire on $1 million? And I'm thinking, when I think about this, there's 500,000 people who get this. I wonder, of that group, how many people say, yeah, I'd love to do a study of that to find out what the striations are and find out who's where it is. The closer to retirement you are, I mean, 1.2 million, and then they owe 140,000. There's a lot of moving parts in there, Jonas.
There is. And walk us through the lifestyle, your lifestyle in retirement, Corey. What's it going to look like for you? I mean, I just talked to a customer this week, and he's going to volunteer for 3 months, and that was his biggest concern, was having ample income to replace 3 months out of 1 year in retirement. So really, it's all about, I think, Doug, it's all about your retirement lifestyle.
Yeah, it makes sense. Makes sense.
It's something both of you guys kind of talked about, and I can remember back to a conversation I had with some clients where I met with somebody that came in. They were retired on about $3,000 a month. Okay, I won't say they were extravagant, but they were absolutely they loved what they were doing. They were enjoying their retirement. The next conversation, I had somebody walk in and say, I don't know how anybody could retire on less than $10,000 a month. It's just impossible.
No, that's the truth. It's 100% the truth on how this works. And, you know, until you know more, Corey, and you shouldn't go without knowing. Like, you should know that in today's environment, this is not a guessing game anymore. You know, if you're out there guessing, you need to go get a one-page plan done with us, get a financial plan, go to anybody. But you should know. There's no reason to wonder what it's going to look like. And here's what happens when people get a plan done. Whether it's what they wanted to hear or what they just needed to hear, they feel better about the situation that they're in.
Yeah.
We all want to know. Maybe we don't really want to know the answers, but like in this situation, our local market here, most people, if they had $1.2 million and they worked a job in where we live here, most people can retire fairly comfortably. I think about all my clients. Most of my clients aren't taking out $15,000 or $20,000 a month.
Yeah.
There's some, but not most. And the older you get, guess what happens? The less you spend.
Yeah.
Go look around all the people you know over 80, ask them how much they spend, maybe their Social Security check. It's just the reality of what it is. And that's what a financial plan can do. It can break out how much can I spend the first 10 years, the next 10 years, the last 10 years, because most people are looking at a 30, 35-year retirement. You'll spend more the first 10 than the second 10. And then the last 10, who knows, right? That's when we need maybe some assisted living or, some extended type nursing care as we get older.
There we go. We're in the more you know segment, like that GIF. But the more you know, the better off you are. Find out at premieriwm.com. Like Roger was alluding to, you can download the 10 critical steps before retirement guide that walks you through building your own needs, wants, and wishes framework so that you can have a better understanding, or get in touch with him at 800-383-6590 at Premier Investments and Wealth Management. Question 2 for Jonas here. Chris wants to know, is investing basically useless if you don't already have money? I'm in my early 40s and new to investing. I keep hearing everyone should invest, but I find myself wondering, if I don't have real capital, what's the point? Putting small amounts into stocks you won't touch for 10 to 20 years doesn't really feel like building wealth. It feels more like marking money and hoping inflation doesn't wipe it out. At the same time, the only way I see people making serious money in the market is by pulling in large sums and hoping the price moves in their favor. And once you're doing that, it starts looking a lot like trading or straight up gambling, not long-term investing. Interesting.
Chris, what's going on here, buddy? What YouTube videos have you been watching here? One of the things that you have to understand is investing in small amounts isn't useless, it's essential. And I think that we all started with doing $25 a month in a mutual fund. And if you don't believe me, look at the actual proof. And right now, there's $43 trillion in retirement accounts right now. There's 77 million baby boomers. If you were to survey those 77 million baby boomers, I would say probably 95% of them didn't have a lump sum. They didn't have a huge inheritance. They didn't win the lottery. They just started putting money in their 401ks. So that's the good news, Chris, is basically these small amounts are they're not useless, they're essential. And the reason I know that is I have so many customers that actually went through a major financial crush or crisis in their 40s called a divorce. And 20 years later, they've recovered it. They've recovered out of it. They've been financially brilliant recovering from this divorce in their 40s, because one of the tips that they've done is they've gradually increased their savings rate each year, Doug. And the nice thing about small amounts is you can automate that. So I have a tendency to believe that people forget, and they forget that they're saving money and they forget what their savings rate is. So you can actually play some games where you're automating that each year, and it's increasing your contributions each year. So there's light at the end of the tunnel, Chris. You actually, nobody, I would say not everybody, I would say the majority of people don't start with large lump sums.
Yeah. Talk to me about haystack versus piece of straw.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's another thing he's getting into here. He says, individual stocks and hoping that it doesn't get wiped out.
There's 1,000 different ways to be successful with investing. Some people buy individual equities. Some people buy individual bonds. Some people buy CDs. So there's just all different sorts of ways. My philosophy has been haystacks, and that's a diversified portfolio of stocks and bonds based on somebody's time horizon, risk tolerance. And we like the bucket strategy. I had a nice call this week with somebody that's done a great job since 1997 buying individual equities, buying the needles, Doug, and he wants buckets. He wants diversified buckets. So we really try to help people. We try to stay up on the money out later game. A lot of people have done a good job with the money in. We're kind of like their money out later team.
Yeah.
So they want to know how to spend this, how to enjoy it, how to tax efficiently take the money out, and ultimately not have to worry about it. Again, my customer that wants to volunteer for 3 months, he doesn't want to watch the stock market for 3 months. So back to your question, Chris, ultimately I would focus on the things that you can control. You don't necessarily need a big lump sum. Start with these smaller amounts. They're essential. And just look at what Jonas did. And I'm not I don't
look at what Jonas did.
I don't call myself a success rate, but everybody on this panel up here, we all started with $25 a month in a mutual fund.
Yeah.
I think this is the biggest misconception of how people build wealth.
Yeah.
I'm just going to go back to the previous question. They told us they had $1.2 million. I am quite certain that was built by contributing every pay period.
They just didn't find it. Like,
Nobody does.
Yeah, just wake up at 60 and hey, there it is.
Here's the difference. Okay. Wealthy people have more that they can contribute on a regular and consistent basis. We have some people that do $5,000 a month ACHs. I have a person who does $25,000 a month. But guess what they're doing? They're doing it every month.
Yeah.
The numbers just get bigger the more money you have. They just didn't walk in with a big check with $1 million. They're doing it every month because it's a regular, consistent habit that leads to really good results in the end. So if you haven't started, you start at $25 and then make it a game. I did this for myself when I was 24 years old. I started doing this when I was 23. Started as a game. I was doing $25 a week. And then I'm like, well, I think I could do more. And it's just going into a savings account. So if I needed the money, I could get it. And I just kept ratcheting it up until the point it's like, whoa, I can't afford that. Like, I have to pull money out of the account. And I found this happy equilibrium of what I could do on a weekly basis. And then every year I increase it. And I do the same. I still do it today with my investments. If you ask Elias, I do an ACH every single week. In fact, I'm actually contributing about daily between an ACH to a couple different places and then my 401k at work. It comes out to, I'm making a deposit every day somewhere.
Yeah.
But I don't ever notice it because it's never a large chunk of money. And that's how most people get successful investing. It is not saving up and writing a check.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen.
And the good news for Chris, he's in his early 40s. So he's reaching those peak earning years where he can, like Roger said, you almost get addicted to saving. You almost get inspired by the balance that you have in there with these smaller amounts. So Chris can really cruise into some programs now by contributing. The more he gets paid more.
Check this out. $1,600 a month for 20 years in the S&P 500. It's about $1 million. So there's really no reason that Chris is not a millionaire by the time he retires.
And you know what? I'm going to send it. Casey's got the next question, but I'm going to wrap this one up here real quick by just saying that it takes money to make money. There will come a point where I hit it recently, my investments, where I saw a market move and I saw the percentage move, but then I saw the dollar amount move and I was like, okay.
That's real. That's real.
Okay. Yep. Now, I'm prepared for it to go down too.
That's a really good point. This is completely unexciting.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it's hard. And I see all these numbers out there like, oh, yeah, the first struggle is getting the first 10,000. That's true. Then it's getting to 100. And after 100, it gets a lot easier because now when the market goes up 10 or 15 or 20%, you start to see a meaningful gain. And then when you hit 500, guess what happens? You're like, I can live on that.
And you continue to put money into this at the same time. So you're just like plowing it and it's plowing in for you. It's just something remarkable. If you go to premieriwm.com, you're going to find out more about what you can do in order to create the kind of wealth that you need. Now, this is the thing, is that it's going to take a plan to do so, but that's what they're there for at Premier Investments and Wealth Management, is to put that financial plan together, whether it's Roger, it's Jonas, whether it's Casey. What they're going to do is they're going to sit down with you and they're going to walk you through scenarios, find out your comfortability level, find out where you want to be when you retire, and then they will work a plan in order to make that roadmap. But it starts by getting in touch with them to make that appointment. You can do it online at premieriwm.com. You can just say, contact me, or make the appointment online with whomever you want. Call 800-383-6590. Get in touch with Premier Investments in Wealth Management, named to Forbes 2026 Best in State Wealth Management Teams. Over to Dr. Mushrush.
Just you, Doug.
Jerry wants to know, my husband and I have been paying our grandson's tuition about $42,000 a year. We've been making payments directly to the college. I've heard mixed things about whether that counts as a gift. Do I need to file a gift tax return, or does paying the school directly change how the IRS looks at this?
Jerry, this is a fantastic question. And what I really like about this is it's Much more complicated than just the initial question that you're asking there, because it very, very much depends, as many things that we talk about on this show seems to be. I will say, right off the bat, that the very short version of that is that typically a direct contribution or direct payment over to an education institution does qualify for an exemption from the gift tax rules, where you wouldn't necessarily have to report that as a gift. Now, there are some exceptions to the exception, mostly being that it does need to be tuition payments only. So any payment that is made for tuition on behalf of another individual is not actually coded as a gift. But, and here's where the big but comes over into effect. If you are paying for other things, so let's say that payment that they are receiving also includes room and board, or it includes parking spaces, or it includes access to the aquatic center, for example. Any of those other things above tuition may then fall underneath the gift rules, and there may need to be a gift tax return depending on the amounts that would be due at that point in time. So ultimately, there are a couple of things that are going to be really important. You'll want to make sure that you talk to your grandkid, ask them what it says on their 1098-T. So a 1098-T is an IRS form, or it's a form that's provided over to the IRS that shows the amount of tuition payments that were made to an education institution. So you want to see what that 1098-T means. And then if you are doing this distribution as a reimbursement out of like a 529, because that is actually another way that you can kind of get around this just a little bit, you'll want to make sure that your 1099-Q does not exceed the amount on that 1098-T.
It's something, it can be complicated. You need to talk to professionals about this. One question I did have is, talk to me a little bit about the lifetime maximum gift amount and the way that figures into this.
Yeah, so one thing that we do want to make sure that we pay attention to is the overall amount of gifting that you can do to an individual. It's about $14 million right now. So we're okay probably on that standpoint. If you go over $19,000, $19,500 per year in 2025 as a gift, then you would need to file a gift tax return. Mm-hmm. So what starts to happen in here, kind of along with these numbers that you're talking about with that $42,000, there is some potential depending on the way that payment actually is structured. So let's say, just for the sake of argument, that $30,000 of that is tuition payments and only $12,000 of that is non-tuition payments. Mm-hmm. Well, you still probably don't need to file a gift tax return because you're underneath that gifting exclusion of the $19,500. Okay. Now, the other practical matter on that too, Jerry, is assuming you're married, this is per individual to another individual. So the reality is that you and your wife can give about $39,000 to any grandkid without having to file any gift tax return, and then double that if you've got somebody who's married as well, because of the way the gift splitting rules work on that side. So in reality, we probably don't have to file a gift tax return in this particular set of circumstances, but again, it just very much depends on how many grandparents we have, how many grandkids are in that particular household, and the way that we're setting it up underneath that. So the answer is probably not, but maybe.
Yeah, exactly. It depends. I've often thought that if you were going to have twins with your wife, they would be named It and Depends, because that way it would fulfill everything the way that those happen. You know what? This is why it's important to have professionals on your side. My friends at Premier Investments and Wealth Management definitely would like to be in your corner. PremierIWM.com is the website to find out more. Jerry, it sounds like you've got a pretty good financial plan, but it doesn't hurt to kick the tires. If you already have a financial plan, get in touch with them, 800-383-6590. And if you don't have a financial plan, it's time you get one. Go to PremierIWM.com, click Get Started, and get started. Question for the table. Danielle wants to know, as financial advisors, do you see a point where having more money doesn't actually improve someone's happiness or lifestyle all that much? For example, is there a meaningful difference in day-to-day life between retiring with $3 million versus $5 million for the average client? For the average client. So I don't know who wants to take this first. Roger, we'll start at your end.
I would say likely not for the average client. Mm-hmm. 3 to 5 million, you're able to meet all your regular needs of living. And I think this is where people need to understand how we set up a financial plan. And we talked about having the budget, but once we get into it, it's really, what do you need to live on? Mm-hmm. And what you need to live on is, how much do I need from the day I retire to the day I die to meet my basic living expenses? And basic living is food, shelter, electricity, taxes, some level of entertainment. I would think most people think some level of entertainment. But here's what it's not. Trips to Europe. That's not a need. That would fall in a category 2. So needs, then wants. And I bring that up. I had an individual in about 2 weeks ago. And on their needs, they had like $50,000 a year for travel. He goes, well, no, I need to do that. I said, no, I get it. But you don't need that when you're 95. That's a want, and you're not going to retire unless you can do it, but it's still in the want category. And the reason we break it from needs to wants is because typically wants aren't things that go on for 30 years. It could be, I want to do one trip somewhere, or I want to travel for 12 or 13 or 14 years. Yeah. So for someone who's got 3 to 5 million, likely all their basic day-to-day lifestyle and needs are met. That $2 million difference is probably affecting what they want to do in retirement and maybe what they wish to do. And what you wish to do are all the things you're not sure you could do, but if you could, you would. So that might be, hey, I want to leave $1 million to each one of my kids or grandkids. And when you start to break a financial plan down like that, you're really narrowing in on what it really looks like. But for most people, 3 to 5 million meets the average client, meets their daily living, and the $2 million extra, you likely won't spend. You're likely giving it away or doing something charitable with it. In most cases, I see.
Part of this gets to, Casey, as well, this idea is we hear a little bit about capitalism more so versus other forms of socioeconomic schemata. And there's some people that say, well, there's only so much money that you can have and actually do something with. And it was like, for me, it's like, well, I mean, some people want to do good with the money that they have on top of it, because that difference between 3 and 5 million could mean $2 million to your favorite charity.
Right. But again, I mean, on a day-to-day standpoint, is it significantly different given these numbers? I don't think the answer to that is a resounding yes. Now, what I do think is kind of interesting, and this isn't necessarily based off of asset levels that was posed over in this question, but there actually have been some competing studies that have taken place over the course of the last decade and a half that came up with 2 different sets of answers. So back in 2010, Daniel Kahneman and then Deaton also introduced a study that was quoted around that time frame that what they saw is happiness levels increased to about $75,000 of income, and then there was this sharp plateau in levels of happiness based off of annual income. And that study, I know we talked about it, around that time, and then years later, we kind of used that study quite a bit. Well, back in 2021, Killingsworth came out with a study that they basically took similar information, asked similar questions, not the same questions, had a slightly different methodology to it. And what they found, there was no plateau. Higher levels of income had a direct correlation to higher levels of happiness that were happening over on there. What they ended up doing is they actually took both these 2 different teams of researchers in 2023. They sat down, combined their results, and they actually compared their notes, and they found they were both correct. They were simply measuring, or what they were calling happiness was slightly different measures of the same personality traits. So overall, what the overall trend they found is that generally speaking, around $100,000 or so, you did see a little bit of a plateau that happened, but it wasn't because more money made people less happy. Happy people had a tendency to get happier, but if you were rich and miserable, you just got more rich and more miserable. And so it did create this plateau effect that really pre-existing determinations on how somebody lived their life was a much larger predictor on their levels of happiness rather than the asset levels or how much income that they were actually generating.
And that's the value. That's a great point, Casey. That's the value of a financial plan. It reminds me of a customer. He worked at the avionics hub here in town that owns every part of the plane except for a part of the engine now, I guess. And he basically said that he was always going to retire, Doug, when he had $1.5 million in his 401k. So the day came, I had him and his wife come in. Now you can retire. I don't want to retire yet. I want to retire when I have $2 million. So he came in, I called a meeting. He had $2 million. He said, okay, I'll retire next year. So he retired next year. Yeah. Guess what? he hasn't touched any of his 401k yet.
Yeah.
So it was completely irrelevant.
Right.
So it's the opposite of a hospital pain scale. It's an enjoyment scale where it might be a little bit more enjoyable to go from $3 to $5 million. But if you haven't figured out a way to actually enjoy the money and what purpose the money provides for you,
Right.
that's what a financial plan does.
It's more than just about numbers and cents. By the way, you must have had socio and economic schemata on your bingo card, because when I said that phrase, your eyes just lit up. It's more than just about the dollars and cents, because at Premier Investments in Wealth Management, they understand that a lot of what investing is psychological. It is emotional. In times, it can even be physiological as well. Go to premieriwm.com. Prepare for your meeting with them by downloading 10 critical steps before you retire, so you can find out, do a little homework before you sit down. Needs, wants, wishes framework. You can better understand your priorities as you're getting ready.
Before we move on, Doug,
Yeah.
to that next question, I want to actually point out something that you mentioned there. And I know these guys have probably seen it, countless times, as have I. But you mentioned the physiological reaction when somebody goes through the financial planning process. Like it is actually incredible to watch and sit down with somebody. And Roger talked about this a little bit earlier on, but like moving from that unknown to the, well, maybe I don't like the answer, but now I know, or now I know and I do like the answer. Like that actually does have a physical reaction for people, and you can actually see the moment in a meeting when body language shifts and how they actually turn over mentally, and they now understand exactly where it is that they sit at. It's pretty incredible to watch.
Yeah. It's where they sit and where they want to go, and the whole thing is that, you know what, not everybody's going to be able to reach that. And it's something that you probably, maybe 1% of the people you sit down and talk with, you have to say that to. But for the great number of people, you can get there from here, to turn a phrase. But the important thing is making sure you have a plan. So I'm just not going to Schenectady, New York, because I'll just go east, young man. I have no clue what road or what the traffic's going to be like, what's going to be closed down. It's important to have that plan. Premier Investments in Wealth Management can help you with that. PremierIWM.com or call 800-383-6590 to make your appointment with Premier Investments in Wealth Management, named to Forbes 2026 Best in State Wealth Management Teams. Back to Roger for a question from Alex now. Currently, I'm in the 24% tax bracket, trying to decide whether Roth contributions still make sense for me. Part of me likes the idea of tax-free growth, but another part of me wonders if I should be taking the tax break now with traditional contributions. How do you think about that trade-off, Roger?
It's a really good question. It's a question a lot of people face. A little bit of this depends on how old you are, where you are in that 24% tax bracket, because I hear this a lot. Well, I'm in the 24% bracket. You're not paying 24% in tax. Your effective rate is something significantly less than 24%. Okay. One of the mind shifts I kind of talk to people about is, not everything what we do is about optimization, because optimization is only possible if we know specific outcomes in the future. And we have no idea what future tax rates are going to be. So if we start to think about the world we live in, what's the debt? 38, 39 trillion, something like that. How are we going to pay it off?
Yeah.
It's only through taxes. It's only through revenue that it's paid off in one form or another. So if they raise taxes, would you like to be in the only known tax code in America, which is 0%? That's the Roth. So that would be the reason you do it. I want to have a known outcome in the future. That's one. The second thing that very few people talk about or really think about, when you make a Roth contribution, you're actually contributing more. Think about it. Everybody is entitled, if you have a 401k, to a $23,500 contribution, whether that's Roth or that's traditional. If you do $23,500 in Roth, that's an after-tax amount.
Yeah.
So that'd be the same in your tax bracket as being able to contribute $30,000 because you're in the 24, $30,000 to a traditional. So would you like the ability to contribute more to your retirement plan?
Okay.
Inherently, Roth is more. So that's the second way to think about it. And then the other thing to think about is it maybe doesn't have to be all or none. Everybody thinks it's all or none. I'm a believer in being in a known tax rate and know what it is in the future. It's way more easy to plan if you can plan on zero taxes. But if you can't get over it, maybe you just do a combination of the both, right? Maybe you do some pre-tax, some Roth. And it leads to that idea that we want different buckets of money when we retire so that we can pull different tax levers. Don't have to have all tax-free in retirement. Think about it. If it's all tax-free, are you really getting the best bang for your buck? Because ideally you'd max out like the 12% tax bracket. Yeah. So sometimes just a little balance starts to make sense. And it's a hard question. A lot of people have this. The closer you are to retirement, the less benefit you're getting from that Roth contribution. But Alex, if you're under 45 or 50, Roth is probably still pretty attractive for you. Then I pose this question. If you put a room of highly compensated executives in here, you're making $500,000+ a year, and you ask them, are you doing pre-tax or Roth? Most of them are doing Roth. Why? They want the known tax code of zero. Right. They want some certainty in their financial future.
Yeah, and the other thing you were talking about, I kind of smiled when you said there's the uncertainty there. If you have a thing like, I know when I'm going to die. Well, you don't know when you're going to die. That's you don't have, no birth certificates have an expiration date on it. It doesn't work that way. But I like really the way that you worked with this guy, because at this point he'd seemed like an all or nothing. You said, hey, you can put something together, but it is a plan that it takes in order to do so. And you need to find out a little bit more about what they do at Premier Investments, Roth versus traditional contributions. At premieriwm.com, they have a Rothification and your retirement guide. It's part of the Investor's Guide series. Encourage you to download that and take a look at it. When you're done with that, just make your appointment. You can either call them at 800-383-6590, or you can just go ahead and poke through at premieriwm.com and make your appointment right there, right at that time as well. Jonas, Mary wants to know, would it be crazy to plan on dying with debt? 63, I have no kids or family to inherit what I have. My current house is paid off and worth about $590,000. Planning to move into a townhouse that's one level and a more manageable size. The townhouse is only $360,000, so I could pay for it in cash, but with the proceeds from my current home. But would it make any sense to sell the house, put a decent down payment on the townhouse, and invest the rest? I have plenty of other retirement money, about $1.5 million, but I want to live well and travel when I can.
Great question, Mary. It's actually not unreasonable at all to have debt in your situation. It kind of reminds me of the bumper sticker I see behind people's Buicks and Cadillacs sometimes. I'm spending my children's inheritance. Well, Mary doesn't have any children, and it doesn't sound like she doesn't have any heirs. One of the things that you could do is both do a pro and a con on a spreadsheet. If you're looking at a condo, having a condo mortgage, if you pay the condo off, obviously you're going to eliminate that risk, Doug, because you're not going to have any more of those future payments. Now, if you take the cash, probably tax-free, and just put it somewhere in a bucket, then basically you're going to be more liquid. That might help your lifestyle a little bit more, and you're going to create some flexibility with this $200,000 or $300,000 of cash, newfound cash that you have. So in your situation, it's really your choice, but you're in total control of this situation, Mary. And I think that if you do take the cash for a while and put it in a bucket, you could ultimately always pay that condo mortgage off later if you get sick of making that mortgage payment. So you're in control in this situation, Mary, because like you said, you don't have any heirs. And I think you can use debt as a tool and not necessarily the golden rule of having everything paid off in retirement.
It's interesting because I know that you've talked about this before, this idea that people come to you and they say, well, we want to do this. So they want to make a change in their financial plan as far as the amount of money that they're taking out for different purposes. I mean, you literally, that's part of the financial plan is you run scenarios, and there's, tens of thousands of them, and it comes back with, I guess, the mean, right? But the idea is that somebody with a financial plan with you, they can come back in and you can literally say, I can tell you with 95% certainty that there's going to be no difference between X or Y.
Absolutely. That's what I think Mary needs is a Premier Vision document, somebody to sit down and go over some more of these goals that she has and really go over the opportunities that she has, ultimately the pros and cons, and the decision is up to her. But I think that she could be able to use debt as a tool. And like I said, she could always pay the condo mortgage off later on if she wanted to.
You know, I'll make a real quick comment on this too, because even over on some estate planning considerations, I mean, it's just when do you want to pay the mortgage back is ultimately what it comes down to it, right? Because if you look at the way that most states' probate laws are actually set up, any creditors that you have are going to get paid before any charitable entities or anything like that that you're trying to leave money to. So she could pay the mortgage now, or she could pay the mortgage after she passed away. Given the asset levels that she's talking about here, we're probably not running everything down to zero and she's going completely negative at that point, unless she just has one really, really good run of retirement on that. But you know, at some point in time, as a practical matter on the estate planning standpoint, it's probably going to get paid back. It just depends on when do you want to pay it.
Yeah.
And how about doing a Premier Vision document so she doesn't leave all her money to a cousin that she doesn't like?
There you go.
Exactly. Or, you know, the Humane Society is another one, too. You could do a Premier Vision document so you can leave it to that. So that's at premieriwm.com. Click Get Started, and you answer a couple of questions. They provide you that one-page Premier Vision document and, Mary, a free no-obligation consultation. They'll come to you. You can come here. They'll do it over the internet. They'll do it, I mean, however you want to do it. They just want to be able to sit down with you and help you work through your situations, kind of like Casey's going to do over this next one. Dr. Mushrush?
Just to you, Doug.
My parents are updating their estate plan, Mariah says. I've heard you guys and other financial people talk about putting POD or TOD designations on everything, including bank accounts. But my parents' attorney said a trust would be a smoother to pass on to the bank accounts without going through probate. My parents have a decent 6 figures in checking and savings, but that doesn't seem that crazy. So my brother and I are trying to figure out if their attorney is just upselling them or if a trust actually makes sense. I'm curious about your thoughts on when to use beneficiary designations and when people actually need trusts. Before we go anywhere, can you define POD and TOD, please?
I absolutely will. Mariah, fantastic question. Now, just to go back over on what you're talking about, payable on death, so POD, and transfer on death, or TOD, really all this means is putting a beneficiary designation on a non-retirement account. So things like IRAs or 401ks, Roth IRAs, these accounts you can put a beneficiary designation on, life insurance policies. The equivalent to that in the non-retirement world for various financial accounts is that payable on death or that transfer on death designation. Now, a couple of things on here that you mentioned. It is a great idea to have some sort of a transfer mechanism set over onto accounts. Now, whether or not we're utilizing a trust arrangement or whether or not we're utilizing a payable on death or a TOD arrangement is going to depend on a lot of factors that are very unique to each individual set of circumstances in each situation. One of the benefits of a POD or TOD account is that it can bypass the probate process, similar to a trust. Now, when you say trust, I'm going to make an assumption here because anytime somebody says, I have a trust, I always have to ask, wonderful, what kind of trust? Because that really doesn't tell me a whole lot.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that this is probably a revocable trust, meaning that it really doesn't have a whole lot of an impact on somebody's financial life until they either become incapacitated or until they pass away. So it becomes a incapacity and testamentary planning tool rather than an estate planning tool in terms of moving assets outside of an estate. Okay? So it really depends on the individual set of circumstances, whether the payable on death or utilizing the trust is the best way to go through. You mentioned money over in bank accounts or over in the cash accounts and maybe some retirement accounts. Beneficiary designations are extremely useful on these. But what about other types of assets? So, for example, do we have real estate? If we've got a lot of real estate, then that probably leads me to believe a trust may be a more appropriate transfer mechanism rather than just using the transfer on death. What state is the real estate in? Because if we have it in Minnesota, or we have it in Missouri, or we have it in Iowa, or Kansas, or Texas, or Louisiana, is going to have a major impact on which one of these instruments actually makes the most sense. Because some of these states that I just mentioned have a transfer on death deed on real estate, and other ones don't. Whether or not the size of the estate, if something does go through probate, so think maybe vehicles that you can't put a transfer on death on in some states, other assets that maybe you can't put a transfer on death on, like personal property. If the value of that is high enough that you're going to be outside of a simplified estate or simplified probate process, that may be another consideration that you want to think about as well. So the asset type, the different transfer mechanisms that are available to those various different assets, the location of all the different assets are going to be major things that you want to think about on whether or not it makes the most sense for a trust versus just using the POD or the TOD. Now, interestingly enough, the POD or TOD, there is actually a shorthand legal name for that called a Totten trust.
Okay.
So basically what it is saying is that you're creating a de facto trust arrangement to simply transfer some, use the transfer mechanisms when somebody passes away is ultimately what that really comes down to. But there's not really a hard and fast rule, I would say, for every set of circumstances on when a payable on death versus a transfer on death makes the most sense. And it's going to be a factor of the type of assets, the type of transfer mechanisms that are available on those assets, where they're located, the total size of the estate is going to be a major impact on that as well, and where everything, how the overall arrangement can be. So unfortunately, I don't have a good answer for you, Mariah. If the attorney is suggesting that, ask them why, because they should be able to explain that to you or explain that to your parents on why the trust makes the most sense versus using these other transfer mechanisms.
And this is really one of the important things to recognize. Mariah, you're probably doing a pretty good thing by looking over your parents' shoulder. It's not a bad thing, especially if you have the kind of family where you've had these kind of conversations. And that's one of the things I've learned from working with my friends at Premier Investments and Wealth Management is that they encourage open conversations with family members because ultimately you need everybody, you would like to have everybody on the same page because it creates a lot less friction when everybody is on the same page. And a financial plan ultimately resulting in some sort of a trust situation may be something that could figure out what the good end to this would be. Get in touch with my friends at Premier Investments and Wealth Management. Make an appointment today at premieriwm.com or call 800-383-6590. Final question for everybody on the board here. Jordan says, my partner and I are talking about moving in together, but our incomes are very different. I earn significantly more, so I'd like to be paying a bigger share of the rent and household expenses. I'm comfortable with that, but I'm trying to figure out the difference between what's fair and what's financially smart. Before we move in together, how should couples think about splitting home expenses when they're not married and one person earns a lot more? Who wants to grab this tiger by the tail right off the bat? Yep, it's Jonas. So
I like it.
Great question, Jordan. I would talk to your partner about finances and develop a financial plan for the household. And since you're the breadwinner, it kind of reminds me of this panel here. We're all the breadwinners.
Oh, no.
Of our family, except for Doug.
Except for me, no.
And we have stay-at-home CEOs. And we're kind of the CFOs. We're the co-CFOs. They're the CFOs as well. So we've all developed some type of a household financial plan. So it's easier to talk about money. But here's an idea for Jordan, and I'll kick it over to Roger and Casey. Since you're the primary breadwinner, maybe you could talk to your partner about just paying some essentials, paying for utilities, the car payments, and the car insurance. Start with 3 different essential payments, depending on your partner's income, and then that's your household financial plan.
I have many questions.
Roger is vexed.
Well, okay. Are we planning on this being a long-term relationship and are we treating this as a marriage or not? Because if we're treating it as a marriage and you're merging finances, and what share people pay doesn't really matter, right? It doesn't. Like if you're married, you should combine your finances. Why does it matter if one person makes more than the other person? Mm-hmm. If we're not sure we're committed, then you have to keep it separate, which means we're not buying a house together because we're not committed yet. Like being together and being married are legally two different things. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you shouldn't buy a house together. Secondly, if you're not married yet, you should plan on what the breakup looks like before you start. Okay, if we decide to cohabitate together, we're going to do this together. What's it look like if we split up? I had a friend of mine. She had a son, going to buy a house with a girlfriend. Bad idea. Mm-hmm. Son didn't take the recommendation. I'm like, if you're not married, why are you buying a house? What happens if one moves out and you're on a mortgage together? Who's responsible? Somebody. Mm-hmm. Yep. What if they stop paying? Are you going to let them just wreck your credit?
Coast?
No, you're going to let them coast because you're not going to want to wreck your credit.
You mean you can't call the mortgage company and say that your
you guys don't
girlfriend moved out?
They won't understand.
No, they don't care. They're going to be like, where's my payment?
Well, that can sometimes even be a problem during marital relationships. So if you have an unmarital relationship, it just creates
all the problems.
It's just a much larger, more knotty issue.
Here's how I would go about this. If I was in this situation, I wanted to cohabitate with somebody, and we weren't fully committed through some legal doctrine.
Right.
You make most of the money. Why don't you either own the house yourself or pay the rent yourself? That way you know what you're getting into. Mm-hmm. It's not going to be, we bought a house that we could afford with two incomes, but if one's not here, no, just do it yourself. You're the primary breadwinner. It doesn't really matter who pays for what. But you should just be responsible for one thing. And maybe your partner is responsible for their car insurance. Just keep it separate until you're committed. Mm-hmm. But I wouldn't share the rental. That's going to lead to problems.
Right.
It will lead to problems.
Well, and I was going to say, even on like a lease agreement,
let's the doctor.
Even things like that. Well, here's a couple of things that I think that's really important.
Legal standpoint, right?
From a legal standpoint, you are entering into a partnership. It is a partnership where you are pursuing some common goal. Now, the particular common goal in this one isn't profit. It is a place to live, a place to be at. But that also creates a lot of really thorny legal issues if you have both those two individuals over on a lease and one person wants out. Because now you have to have somebody who's going to, either both of you are breaking the lease or one person is breaking the lease with permission from the landlord. And what landlord is going to give that permission?
Nobody.
They don't do it very often. So it is a legal quagmire that you are looking at getting over on there. Now, I think that your comment that you made, base everything off of your income. Now, if you want to...
Him just sign the lease.
Well, exactly. Base everything off of your income. You sign the lease, you sign the mortgage. If you want to give your partner some level of legal protection, you then sublease to them. You sign a sublease, and you actually create a completely separate legal arrangement that is completely and totally divorced from what your emotional situation is. And that's where I think most people in this particular kind of a situation get into trouble, is because we're in love, everything's wonderful, and it's never going to change, and we're not going to hate each other 6 months from now.
I wonder if they've ever lived together before.
Probably not, given the question.
But Casey, that is the way to maturely handle this. Right. Is one person take the breadwinner? It's your place.
Yep.
Sublease to your partner if they insist on paying rent and you want this to be fair and equitable to the best of the ability. Yeah. And then if the breakup happens, you already have a plan. Right. Whenever we talk about partner, you said the word partnership. First thing I always tell Casey, what's the breakup look like?
Yep.
If it doesn't work out,
what's the exit?
What's the exit?
And that's not like being negative or assuming it's not going to work out. But that's what mature business people do, is figure out, if this doesn't work out, how is it going to end? Because if you don't know how it's going to end, I promise you, it's going to be a gigantic mess.
Yeah.
Yep.
It definitely can be. It's interesting because my situation when we first got together, it was like we sat down, went through all the bills, and then we negotiated a set amount that I was responsible for bringing to the table every month. It wasn't about it because I was a transient vagrant, damn near homeless when I got picked up off the street.
You clean up pretty good, bud.
You look pretty good, Doug.
You saw me anyway. So, the whole point was like I didn't have an account in my name, and there's no need to like sit there and start wrestling with these accounts. So it's like, okay, here's the amount of money that you're going to be responsible for. Just make sure you get it every month. So that's the way that it's been handled. And there's a million different ways of doing it. But you know what? I like the way that you guys are thinking about this because you're right. This is some sort of a contractual relationship. There is a paper trail that goes along with it. The idea of subleasing from your boyfriend or girlfriend is a kind of an interesting one because they're not your landlord, but boy, they can make it pretty tough to go to the bathroom if you want to.
You gotta have. Well, the other part of that too is let's say that you're on the other side of this. So we're talking about the primary breadwinner. That also actually puts some protections in place for that person who is not the primary breadwinner. Right? Because if what we're putting over into place is, okay, we're going to have this thing terminate 60 days after we have whatever that decision is, that gives them 60 days to figure out what they're going to be doing, where it doesn't have to be an immediate thing that does give them a level of certainty and a level of protection. And so if we're walking into this thing and we're saying, I love you enough that I'm going to be mature and have this conversation with you, it's going to really open up those lines of communication and actually give you a much better option of having the thing work out in the first place anyway.
Yeah, exactly. This is the kind of real talk you're going to get at Premier Investments and Wealth Management, and it's something that you can have as a client of theirs. PremierIWM.com is the website. Tons of downloadable material. They've got podcasts that the Behind the Wealth is something that Roger and Elias do. Everybody's got their own little thing that they put out. But the big thing is that they're sort of united in action because they've got a back office that works with them on a daily basis in order to bring you the best that they have. They were named to Forbes 2026 Best in State Wealth Management Teams at Premier Investments and Wealth Management. Make your appointment online at PremierIWM.com or you can call 800-383-6590. And you know what? One of the nice things about this is that it doesn't matter where you are. They may very well be able to help you, whether you're in the heart of the country in Cedar Rapids, Des Moines, or if you're deep in the heart of Texas. For Roger, for Jonas, for Dr. Mushrush.
Just you, Doug.
I'm Doug Wagner. We'll talk to you again next week.
Securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor, member FINRA SIPC. The opinions voiced in this show are for general information purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. To determine which investments may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, and financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Premier Investments in Wealth Management and LPL Financial do not provide specific individualized tax or legal advice. We suggest that you discuss your specific situation with a qualified tax or legal advisor. Rebalancing a portfolio may cause investors to incur tax liabilities and or transaction costs and does not assure a profit or protect against loss. Economic forecasts set forth may not develop as predicted, and there can be no guarantee that strategies promoted will be successful. All performance referenced is historical and is not a guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and cannot be invested into directly. There is no assurance that the techniques and strategies discussed are suitable for all investors or will yield positive outcomes. The purchase of certain securities may be required to affect some of the strategies. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of principal. There is no guarantee that a diversified portfolio will enhance overall returns or outperform a non-diversified portfolio. Diversification does not protect against market risk. Dollar cost averaging involves continuous investment in securities, regardless of fluctuations in price levels. Investors should consider their ability to continue purchasing through periods of low price levels. Such a plan does not assure a profit and does not protect against loss in declining markets. Contributions to a traditional IRA may be tax deductible in the contribution year, with current income tax due at withdrawal. Withdrawals prior to age 59.5 may result in a 10% IRS penalty tax in addition to current income tax. A Roth IRA offers tax deferral on any earnings in the account. Qualified withdrawals of earnings from the account are tax-free. Withdrawals of earnings prior to age 59.5 or prior to the account being open for 5 years, whichever is later, may result in a 10% IRS penalty tax. Limitations and restrictions may apply. Traditional IRA account owners have considerations to make before performing a Roth IRA conversion. These primarily include income tax consequences on the converted amount in the year of conversion, withdrawal limitations from a Roth IRA, and income limitations for future contributions to a Roth IRA. In addition, if you are required to take a required minimum distribution, RMD, in the year you convert? You must do so before converting to a Roth IRA. Forbes' Best in State Wealth Management Team's ranking was developed by Shook Research and is based on in-person, virtual, and telephone due diligence meetings and a ranking algorithm that includes a measure of each team's best practices, client retention, industry experience, review of compliance records, firm nominations, and quantitative criteria, including assets under management and revenue generated for their firm. Investment performance is not a criterion because client objectives and risk tolerances vary, and advisors rarely have audited performance reports. Shook's research and rankings provide opinions intended to help investors choose the right financial advisor and team, and are not indicative of future performance or representative of any one client's experience. Past performance is not an indication of future results. Neither Forbes nor Shook Research receive compensation in exchange for placement on the ranking. For more information, please see www.shookresearch.com. Shook is a registered trademark of Shook Research, LLC.